announcements. Please note that we will not open attendees' audio or video lines during our live broadcast. However, we do welcome your questions and your comments. Please submit them at any time. You can do that using the chat window. You just click on the video display that you see now, and it will flip you over to a comments section. We'll use that to keep an eye on your questions and comments as we go. You may also submit your questions and comments by email, and we have a email that you can use that you see at the bottom of our screen now, support@salesmanagement.org. We'll put this banner back up in case the spirit moves you to email us a question. Also, as a reminder, please note that our webcast today is being recorded. We will make it available for playback in the Sales Management Association's resource library, where our members will also be able to download slides from today's session. Our session today is one in a series of web-based Sales Management Association presentations that feature thought leaders and practitioners in the field of Salesforce effectiveness. The Sales Management Association is a professional association for sales operations, sales enablement, commercial excellence, and sales leadership professions. We provide our members with research, case studies, peer networking, and professional development. If you're joining us for the first time, we invite you to consider membership in the Sales Management Association. You can learn more by exploring our website here at salesmanagement.org. Also, please keep in mind our upcoming annual conference. This will take place December 7th and 8th at the Gozueta Business School at Emory University in beautiful Atlanta, Georgia. You can learn more about our conference on the conference site, salesmanagementconference.com. We'll begin promotion for that in earnest here in just a few weeks. Hope you can join us for that. I'm Bob Kelly, Sales Management Association Chairman. Today, I've got the pleasure of introducing three excellent panelists and then moderating discussion with them. Let's just spend a moment and talk a little bit about our topic today. It's about Salesforce motivation. So it occurred to me that it would be awfully easy if we got things like this, say on LinkedIn, a little banner that says, "Hey, I'm unmotivated," or "I'm quietly quitting." This is the parlance of the unmotivated. But sadly, we do not have such a thing. We're stuck with trying to suss out the state of motivation in our sales organizations, ourselves as sales leaders. So today's session is really about that topic. What drives sales motivation and how do we impact it as managers? So let's get to our panel. Our panel today, I'm very excited about. I'd like to first introduce Valerie Good. Valerie Good is Assistant Professor of Marketing at Grand Valley State University in Grand Rapids, Michigan. She is a distinguished scholar, frequently cited on the topic of motivating salespeople, among other topics. Her many research awards include winning the American Marketing Association's doctoral dissertation proposal competition and earning in 2023 the prestigious Early Career Scholar Award. She's a two-time recipient of the Hollander Teaching Award for Excellence in College Instruction. She is widely published in academic journals, including the Journal of the Academy of Marketing Science and the Journal of Personal Selling and Sales Management, and in the popular press, including in Harvard Business Review. Since 2017, she has served as managing editor of the Journal of Personal Selling and Sales Management. We're very happy to have you with us, Valerie Good. Let's make you a decent-sized person on the screen like that. Hi, Valerie. Thanks for being with us. Great.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, our next panelist is David Mead. He is Vice President and Transformation Consultant at U.S. Bank, the United States' fifth largest commercial bank. David began his career as a bank teller as a new college graduate and has spent his career in the financial services industry with stops in retail, business, and international banking sectors. In his current role, he provides direction to the bank's transformation and modernization efforts. Thank you very much to David for being here, also to U.S. Bank for making him available. Please do note that David's opinions expressed here, they don't necessarily reflect those of U.S. Bank. David, thank you for being with us. Welcome.
Thanks, Bob. Good to be here.
Terrific. And our third panelist is Remy Morgan. He is Senior Vice President of Sales at SalesScreen, whose global sales platform combines gamification with data visualization to keep modern sales teams motivated and engaged. Remy has led the firm's sales effort for the past 10 years. He's a resident of Norway. He joins us from Oslo. Welcome, Remy Morgan. I was told
Bob.
that's how you say hello to a Viking.
Yeah,
is that
perfect.
true?
Perfect.
Excellent.
10 out of 10.
Well, thank you very much. Great panel. Valerie, Remy, and David for being with us. Let's talk a little bit about the topic at hand, sales force motivation. So I hope you enjoyed that cheeky slide I had with the crude, image of a person with a quiet quitting badge. There's been a lot of talk about quiet quitting of late among just the workforce in general. For those who don't know, it refers to people who have essentially given up without resigning in their jobs. And this is, of course, a great concern to employers, but especially in sales where motivation is so important. Can we talk a little bit about just the state of Salesforce motivation right now? Is it, if it's less than we expect, why might that be true right now? Maybe where have we missed the mark in sales motivation? Remy, can I ask you to start us off on this topic?
Yeah, I can start. This is something we speak to prospects and clients and sales leaders globally about every single day. I think one, it's a perception problem because quiet quitting for typically a Gen Zer could be just doing what's expected from you. So it's also kind of the alignment between sales leadership and reps, and what kind of effort are we expecting? So leaders are talking about quiet quitting, salespeople aren't, right? Especially the younger ones. And then we've just released a survey, Mind the Motivation Gap, where this survey did over 200 salespeople surveyed here, and 86% of these 200 say that they're motivated in doing their job. If you can go to the next slide, actually, because that's the one there. Yeah. So 86% of sales reps identify themselves as motivated, while 60% of managers list low individual motivation as their top challenge. So there's clearly a gap here, right?
So what we're talking about here is one person's motivation is another person's indifference. So what's exactly misaligned here? Is it what a salesperson is supposed to accomplish in their role, or is it something bigger than that? Are managers too, are they looking for an unreasonable expectation from some of their workers?
I think definitely it's an expectation problem, and a misalignment on what's expected and kind of the revenue, the end goal naturally, but also the underlying metrics that leads to revenue. And if you look at the other slide that you had up earlier there, one up, which is also an interesting thing, is that 76% of managers say that they know and understand how to motivate individual reps, while only 40% of reps says that their managers knows how to motivate them. So there's clearly a huge gap between reps and managers. According to the reps themselves, they're motivated, but if you're gonna ask the managers, they're gonna say that the reps aren't as motivated as they could or probably should be. So yeah, it's definitely misalignment. Yeah, I don't know, Valerie, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm very eager to get your opinion, Valerie. Thank you, and please do jump in. To me, this seems like it's starting to sound a little bit like marriage counseling here. It's like, these expectations, people have an assumption about what the other person wants or expects, and these are things that we have to get right. So very interested in your perspective, Professor Valerie Good.
Yeah, I think there is a disconnect between what really motivates people and what we expect motivates people. So what, you think is going to motivate people underneath you, I think companies honestly have missed the boat a little bit.
So how do we get this right? And first of all, should we have, let's think about it as a typical manager. Perhaps step one is let's critically examine our assumptions about what's motivating people. But secondly, can we construct a better theory of motivation for maybe one that's more thoughtful and expansive? How should we go about doing that for a manager? How should we begin to answer the question thoughtfully for ourselves? What really motivates the people on my team?
So I found when I was doing research and even in practice that we were really focusing on what I call extrinsic sources of motivation. And I even created a slide for that. I don't know if you want to show that, but we really talk more about money and pushes and prods and carrots and sticks than other types of motivation. So what I did was a meta-analysis, and that's a fancy word for saying I looked at published studies over 4 decades and combined effect sizes from those. So my sample size is well over 70,000 people. And I looked at extrinsic sources of motivation like pay, incentive, contests, those kinds of things, compared to intrinsic sources of motivation. What do I mean by that? Well, there's autonomy, freedom on the job, self-efficacy or competence. I'm good at what I do. And the idea of connection or belongingness, these things that keep us motivated that aren't really related to money and aren't pushes and prods. And so I compared them to performance, sales performance. So that could be self-rated, manager rated, or actually objective. How much did I sell? And I did moderators from the study. And what I found was that, yes, extrinsic motivation matters. You can't say that you can't use money to motivate because we are motivated by money. But what I found was there was significantly stronger effect sizes for intrinsic sources of motivation. And if you advance to the next slide, I did another published study where I'm looking at an additional intrinsic source of motivation, and that is the idea of a sense of purpose. This is the idea that our work matters, that we are benefiting society through the work that we do. And I find that this is really important for working harder, working smarter, and actually performing better in our jobs. And this was objective performance data from a company, objective effort measures, and then really getting a sense of whether the salespeople had a sense of purpose. And interestingly, you'll see here that I have age as a moderator, and we find that actually it's really important for younger salespeople to have this strong sense of purpose, that when they go to work, they're making a difference to society. And it was important for everybody, but extra important for this younger generation. So really, I think money has become sort of table stakes. It's important, but once you've got that baseline established, these other sources of motivation are even more important.
Great, thank you. Let's think a little bit more in a little more detail about this insight that you've encouraged us to think about, the sense of purpose. Is it fair to say this is something bigger than just the job itself, the sort of the work, maybe even the work product? It's some way of connecting something larger to that day in, day out effort.
So I think it's benefiting society, knowing how it impacts your customers, but maybe even their customers and society at large, that what you do matters.
Yeah, just trying to, get past this potential trap of, one manager's sense of purpose, which is making your number, is not a very great purpose for a person who's like, I'm already working really hard, So just pointing that out, we need to connect it to bigger ideas beyond the 4 walls of our, a commercial enterprise here. So Anyway, thank you, Valerie. That's a very helpful review of what the academic literature says, and also some newer ideas about maybe things more important to young people. And thank you very much. We're so fortunate today. We have an academic, we have a practitioner, and someone sort of in the business of providing solutions in this area. So let's hear from our practitioner, David, about this topic. About maybe just in general your views about Salesforce motivation, how it works in practice.
Sure. Yeah, and I'll caveat by saying I'm not in a sales role at the moment. I'm in a 30,000 foot level where I'm doing transformation at a higher level than just on a sales team. But I've spent a lot of years in the sales operations and sales space, and have carried the bag, so to speak, a few times as well. So I'd say there's a couple things particularly that we can do when helping sales teams, or really anyone, with motivation. But on the sales side specifically, I would be remiss as a sales ops leader in my day to not say removing impediments is super helpful to motivate salespeople. Remove whatever impediments you can, whether it's systematically or process wise, to help them feel like you're enabling them to make the sales. I think that's key, just as table stakes, again, helping salespeople feel like they've got a team around them, helping them do a very difficult job. And then I would say, on a more broad sense, to echo what Dr. Valerie was saying, I find that the salespeople, at least the ones that I've worked with over the years, view the money they earn as the reward for the risk they take. They're in a risky job. They're in a job that requires a lot of energy, a lot of time, a lot of commitment. And so the financial salary that they receive, and however that comes in, that is essentially in a lot of their minds just, well, yeah, I took a risk and I got paid for it. So that's table stakes in a lot of ways in terms of incentive. And so from there, I think salespeople are just like everybody else in the workforce. We care about who we work with and where we work in terms of the culture around us. And so I have found both in the work I'm doing now and in previous work that it's really the people around the sales team. It's the people you work with, the folks that you talk to every day. You spend a lot of time with these people. And so you build these relationships, and those are the things that motivate us to work hard and to be engaged, to use another term that's thrown around a lot in the market right now, to engage folks. People engage because they like who's around them and they like the environment around them. And they stay engaged when that so and so is relying on me, or so and so has my back. And those cultural items can really help drive motivation across the board.
Yeah, other thoughts? I'll leave it open for a moment.
I have one comment to this.
Yeah,
I think we see in where I am, we speak to a lot of high velocity sales teams, right? There's a lot of young people coming in. It's their first job. And I think what Dr. Valerie and David is talking about is a lot about kind of the established rep, the one person that's been there for a long time. And then we have to kind of look at the new people coming into the industry, they're learning the profession for the first time. And I don't know if you've seen the Dunning-Kruger effect, but you're coming in with a peak of enthusiasm, right? You're just, hey, I'm selling insurance. It's the best thing since sliced bread, and this is amazing, right? And then after a couple of months, you're kind of realizing what this is, and that there's a million other people doing exactly the same, and you get into the valley of despair. And I think intrinsic motivation that Dr. Valerie started talking about, it's not something I'm born with. It's something that comes after years of hard work, after years of extrinsic motivation. When you've been rewarded, you've seen development, you're feeling that you're learning. And you're coming to the slope of enlightenment, and then you kind of come to the peak at some point, and then you're intrinsically motivated. And at that point, it's always important to have great colleagues and have that culture and that purpose. But then at that point, that becomes really important, because that's when you start considering, should I do something else? Should I stay here? Where is development, right? And I think that's something we have to think about. And for all the listeners out there, their teams might consist of 80% new people. Their attrition numbers could be terrible. So I think that's an interesting perspective in this, at least.
Me too. I'm so happy that all three of you actually mentioned culture in some regard in your thoughts about this. And that's a topic I'm very interested in right now as it relates to sales organizations. I have a hypothesis that it matters more now than it has in the recent past because of the challenges in the labor market. It's more challenging now to find, there is not, in fact, an endless supply of people you can throw into a, you know, a, a sales machine now. Companies are finding it harder to compete. And this is a dimension, this is an emerging vector of competition now for employers and especially for sales organizations. Culture, what's it like to work here? What kind of people are these people? And I think this goes to a couple of specific things we should think about. Like one is creating the team, and then the experience of people interacting with others on the team at various stages, including as they come on board to learn. That's a very culture forming experience for a person. I think they get a very visceral experience with a culture at that time. Anyway, just some observations there I think are really interesting. I wonder if if it's true that managers will be giving more emphasis to this topic of culture and doing things like getting rid of toxic team members if no one wants to work with them, regardless of their performance. What do you guys think? Is this a valid? Is this Valerie? Is this a potential research topic, or would this be immediately rejected by you as editor of the Journal of Personal Selling and Sales Management?
No, I think it would be really interesting because you don't hear of companies getting rid of top performers, but the idea of, hey, if there's really toxic person, or if it's affecting the bigger culture and how much we can all make, I think that would be a really interesting research question.
Well, it's not easy to know when this is happening. I mean, so a point or a question I wanted to pose to the panel is, how do we even assess motivation in our organizations? How do we know what's going on? I'll turn to you on this one first, David. Any thoughts?
Yeah, it's the multi-billion-dollar question, right? There's industries built around engagement and motivation, and how do you measure that? And most companies will have most larger companies will have some level of survey that goes out, or some level of inquiry around, do you have the tools that you need? Do you have the support that you need? Do you understand how your team aligns to the larger vision? To some of our other questions. And so that's I would say the common way that we tackle this. I think another great way to look at motivation and look at the culture question is to figure out who is driving your culture. Who are those key people? If you sat down and asked the folks on your sales team, who do you go to get something done? When you really get stuck on something, who is it that you go to? Because a lot of times we aren't going to follow the paper trail that maybe is established. We're to call somebody we know in the network and say, hey, I need help with this thing. How do I get this done? And so if you can measure who those important people are, who your networks are, and who's driving that value for you, then it really helps you know, hey, these are the people that are helping motivate my workers. And if you want to make a change, or you want to do something different and you want to roll that out, you can get some of those change makers on your side to start, and it really makes that process a little bit easier to go and keep your people motivated.
So just understanding the dynamics of influence, even on an informal level, is an important thing to know.
I think so. I think influence clearly has a lot to do with what we do with the day and how we choose to do it. Into Remy's point around duration or career longevity, the new sellers are coming in and they're going to need help. They're going to need direction on, I have this big number now and I have to hit, and it's me in a chair all day trying to figure out how to do that. And so, depending upon, there's a lot of things that go into that mix: your sales cycle, your product set, your value proposition. Is your product commoditized, or is it very singular? Are you selling tangible versus non-tangible goods? Those all go into making the teams very unique, and you have to, in a lot of ways, treat them that way when you build the culture.
Indeed. Remy, your organization markets a commercial solution that enhances, it does a number of things. One of the things I think it does is enhance motivation. It enhances engagement and makes the experience of working for a company better for a person. Sorry, I'm mangling your sales messaging here, but anyway, it occurs to me that when you get a new client or an inquiry, some of them may be in horrible shape. Maybe they see you as a way of rehabilitating a bad situation. And I'm just curious, what kinds of things do you see, and how, what are the warning signs or the indicators of a problem?
No, it's a good question. I think like we meet every type of customer out there, from the banks to the insurance companies to the software companies to the mom and pop shops. And if you have a terrible sales strategy, we can't help you, right? We can't put a band-aid on it. Like, you need a solid strategy, you need good leadership to get good results. There's no solution besides that. But a lot of organizations, they come in with one minor problem, right? Hey, my reps, they're closing deals like that, but they're not motivated to pick up the phone to prospect. Can you help us motivate them with this part of the deal cycle? Hey, we're struggling to increase average talk time on conversations, or to book more meetings, or create more pipeline. So you need a solid strategy, but sometimes you need a spotlight. You need some way to kind of support you in figuring out what's important for the organization right now. And that's what we do. We shine that spotlight on what's important for them.
Gotcha. So sometimes it's a matter of simply highlighting a small component that might be very important to management, but it doesn't rise to the level of awareness for some for the sellers themselves. Let's get into what I like to call the blood and guts of this topic, which is about financial incentives. We've talked a little bit about it. Dr. Valerie Good has explained that often compensation serves as table stakes, if you will, and it's something that you have to get right. After that, it perhaps may not be the most important determinant of motivation compared to some other things that might relate more to intrinsic reward. However, there is always a lot of interest in this idea of how pay can influence our salespeople to do things. In fact, I would suggest that many organizations and many managers go there first. They say, we need to pick up more, do more prospect identification. Let's put that in the comp plan. So anyway, I want to just further explore this role, the relationship of financial incentives to motivating salespeople. What are some pitfalls? What are some best practices here? And I'll go to you first, Valerie.
So I think I just want to emphasize that I don't think money is bad. So we're not talking about volunteers. We're talking about workers. Of course, people want to get paid, and they want to get paid well. Just like David said, this is a risky job. We're expecting that we're going to make it rain. I see students that I'm, have in my classes, and they expect I'm going into sales. I'm going to make good money. And so I think money can be used well to attract people to your company. So, if you have a higher salary potentially, or for these kind of mundane tasks, like Remy was talking about, I have something specific I need you to do. And so we do that little carrot, to try to get them to do something, a behavioral thing. But I think we doubled down too much on the money aspect and don't realize that money is only really noticed on the tail ends. If it's really too low and we're super poor, money's really motivating then. Or if it's really, really high beyond what anybody else would pay, then it can be like, oh, I'm noticing that. But if you're somebody making well into the six figures as a salesperson, and you're given another little contest for $500 or $1,000, it doesn't raise the bar. It's not as motivating as these other items that we've talked about, like our culture, that sense of belonging, who's on our team that we value, or this sense of purpose. What are my customers saying? And how do I make a difference to society through my work? Those are way more important, and for especially for the effort, for getting on the phone and trying to make those cold calls and doing some of these challenging kind of things. I think that remembering the customer part of it is really important, and I feel like we miss that when we're focusing on money too much.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I do think there's this temptation. I mean, I used to design incentive compensation plans for a living, so I know kind of the typical approach, and the typical approach is to consider the salesperson as a 100% rational, willing to optimize their income based on whatever gate or accelerator you put in the comp plan. The salespeople are as homo economicus, as if they're completely rational, and the reality is a lot messier than that. So I'm just curious, what can we do to improve the role of incentives, in particular, to make sure cash incentives are put in the appropriate context to these other things that we've talked about, or to avoid some of the terrible mistakes that firms make. Anyway, any additional thoughts here? I'm gonna wave off David and maybe see if Remy has any thoughts. I'm sure you've seen a lot of interesting things in companies.
Yeah. So to kind of piggyback on Dr. Valerie here, I think it's about it. There's no one size fits all, right? You can't just throw $1 million at everybody and expect that people's got to be motivated by it. You have to layer it. You have to offer multiple things. One person can be motivated by feeling a sense of belonging in the team. Somebody's going to be really motivated because you're selling green energy solutions. Somebody's going to be exceptionally motivated because, hey, there's a PTO reward if I hit my monthly pipeline target. So I think it's about, you have to kind of cover all your bases as a sales leader. You can, and again, that's kind of back to another topic. Most sales leaders, generally, not everywhere, but most sales leaders used to be top sales reps. They used to be that intrinsically motivated, always on top of the leaderboard persona that crushed it, right? And in sales, it's not your management skills that gets you promoted, it's your sales abilities, right? And the problem is, when great salespeople become sales leaders, they don't become great sales leaders. They become sales leaders first, and then they use the same tactics to motivate their team as they did to motivate them. And stats tell us that there's only 14% top performers, really kind of the best of the best. Yeah. So there's a big part of your team they're not going to get to 120% targets. That acceleration bonus isn't going to motivate them. So you have to kind of find ways to get them to develop so they can, at some point in time, become an intrinsically motivated persona where money is important, right?
Yeah, thank you. Great insights. Let me stick with you, Remy, on this next question I want to entertain. So we've talked a little bit about what's happening in motivation of sales people. We've talked about maybe two conflicting ideas. One is that people are different. You can't treat everyone the same. Another is that there might there's also this importance about having kind of a culture or a shared set of experiences and values. So the question I have to you is to consider these two potentially opposing views of what a sales organization is. Is it a team or is it a collection of individuals? And how do we balance an approach to those two things? Maybe that's too high level of idea here, but interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, it's like being a sales leader is extremely difficult, right? You're squeezed in the middle from kind of management team executives and your reps, and all you want to do is try to protect them. And And very often there's too few managers on reps, right? So you want to be able to cater to every single individual, but there's just not enough hours in the day to do that at the level you want to do it, right? So for me, I think you need to find a balance. So find a way to create transparency, create accountability, create visibility in the organization to unify the individual and the group. So let the top performers see how they're tracking, let them benchmark themselves against each other, but also let the middle and bottom performers feel a part of something greater. Hey, we're working together towards this goal or towards whatever we're working towards, but find a way to make everybody feel like they're contributing, that they're making an impact. And then on the motivational side, it's figuring out how to kind of motivate across the spectrum of your team, because as I said earlier, like there's no one size fits all. So you have to find multiple ways of doing this as individuals or smaller groups, and find the different sales personalities in your team. And instead of catering to 100 people, you might have 4 sales personalities, and then divide and conquer and work it that way.
Yeah, good. And as you might have noticed on the bottom of your screen is a little note about submitting a question or comment. Just wanted to remind you of how best to do that. If you don't want to use our public chat, you can also send us a direct email to support@salesmanagement.org. So other thoughts about this notion of sales organizations as individuals or teams? Obviously, they're both. It's a tricky balance that a lot of managers have to approach. Also, I have perhaps maybe one more question for you folks before we go to audience questions, which is how do we get started in this topic? Let's say, for example, that we believe motivation is a problem in our sales force, or we are worried that it might become one. What's one or two things that a manager or an organization can do to either get ahead of this issue or address it? I'll leave the floor open for anyone with a thought here.
I can give my first tip. And I think the first tip is to start recognizing. Start seeing your people, start catching them red-handed, doing a good job, if that's closing a deal or booking a meeting or just great effort. But see people, talk to them, make them feel connected, especially in this hybrid world at home or in the office.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can add to that. I would say just remember it can be tempting in the sales space potentially because we know that the actions the sales teams take drives a specific number or a specific outcome that we're looking for. It's really easy to measure that. And it can be tempting to just get stuck on that measurement as the sole thing you're looking at in terms of, what do these people value or what is important to them. And that can be a downfall. It's both the benefit of working in sales, you know exactly how much revenue you've created, but it's also the downfall because you know exactly how much revenue you've created. And people do what they value, right? They spend their time on what they value. And so finding ways to understand your team, what is valuable to them, what do they need? Those are ways you can start to really create motivation intrinsically for them, rather than having to rely on external factors to try to drive that motivation.
And I'll piggyback on what they've both said, but I would agree with all of that and say stop treating salespeople like they're cash registers. As far as when you do that, you begin to make them feel like this is a transactional relationship. And if what you're focusing on in every meeting is the numbers and the quota and what they're doing and how much their incentives are, how does that translate into how they treat customers or what they say to customers? So my best piece of advice is to start with those customer stories, those wins, as Remy talked about. How did what you do last week impact the life of your customer or help the society? Talk about the customer wins, and that becomes the culture and the voice of the organization. That builds that sense of purpose, even for the brand new person when they hear somebody else's win. and what that did for that customer, now that's what I'm talking about, what I'm excited about, and what's going to keep me motivated to maybe call somebody on a Friday afternoon when I could be out golfing or doing anything else. So start with the customer and then focus on those other things.
These are great ideas. I love them all, but for multiple reasons. But one is because they're free. These are not difficult or even certainly not expensive things to do. They're simply things that managers who are creating a priority around these issues do. Very, very good advice. Well, other closing thoughts? If not, we can entertain some questions from the audience. I'll just remind our audience again about how to submit questions, and also encourage you to do so. We have a few in the queue. You guys prepared to take some difficult questions? Good. I've thrown away all the easy ones. I'm only focusing on the very, very difficult ones. And let's start with the first one. Let's see. So here's a question about, should we actually ask salespeople about what motivates them? And if so, how?
I'll offer on that one if you want. I would say if it's feasible for you to do that, I think there's nothing lost by asking that. It depends here, right? Are you running a call center with 500 people versus a B2B very highly specific sales team where you have maybe 10 or 15 people? Tangibly, it can be harder to do that in a larger team setting. But whatever we can do to not turn a sales position into what feels like a commoditized position, right? Which is, we just expect this of you. If you don't do it, we'll exchange you for the next thing or the next person. That goes a long way. And if you can decommoditize the position and say, you so-and-so matter, right? In this case, asking them what motivates you will help communicate that. It helps to decommoditize what can at times feel like a very commoditized position of, well, you didn't make your quota, you're out, and we put the next one in.
Yeah, it's good insight. Thank you. Yep. Remy.
And especially in those call centers with 500 employees, it's so important that managers actually sit down and have their one-on-ones. And often, again, there's young people, they're new to the industry, figure out where they want to be. They're probably not going to work for your call center for 20 years. If you're lucky, you have them for 2. But create the path together with them in staying for 2 years, right? Hey, if we do this together, you're going to develop, you're going to be an attractive employee for another great company, instead of losing them after 3 weeks because they found no purpose or mission in what you do, right?
Indeed, yeah. Great. Let's get to another question. We have a question about motivating salespeople when there is a large change initiative. How do we keep motivation high during times of transition and significant change? Any thoughts here? I mean, in my experience, and in fact, supported with some benchmarking research we've done with our members, we find that large sales organizations are constantly changing, transforming, so-called, on average, every 3 years. So,
David, do you want to go?
I can if you want. Yeah, I can offer here a little bit. So I would say I've run some big changes for sales teams in the past. And I would say that when you're doing change anywhere in an organization, you have to explain to folks why this change is valuable to them. What value does this offer to them? And because what a salesperson generally hears when they hear change is you're about to disrupt the way that I make my paycheck and the way that I put food on the table and the way that I pay for my kids' tuition or fill in the blank, right? And they have whatever their repeatable process is that they're using to make goal. If you fiddle with that, they feel like you're fiddling with their life, right? And so the stakes are high for them. And so, for example, when I rolled out Salesforce as a substitute CRM for what we had in a previous role, we had to go through and say, this is how we're going to address the pain points you currently have and make your life better. This is why this is adding value to you, as opposed to just a change that is seen as a threat to the current process of earning their commission.
Good.
Yeah.
Other ideas here?
And I think it's like if you can involve the team, and I think that there's change, there's transition, and there's development, right? So looking at what we've been through for the past 18 months, fear of a recession, economic markets that's turbulent, and buyers that's acting differently. They're not buying as easy as they did 18 months ago. So looking at it as development, bringing the team in, and then working on it as a project together, if possible, to turn the ship around or make that change happen. And then you're going to get buy-in, dedication, and commitment from the team.
Good. Other thoughts, closing thoughts? I'll give last call for any last words here. If not, I will thank our esteemed panel, Dr. Valerie Good, David Mead, and Remy Morkin. Great job today. Thank you so much for your insight. Really appreciate you being generous with your time and being with us today. Also, before we sign off, I will remind our audience that our next Sales Management Association webcast is coming up next week on September 20th. At that time, we'll host a session on analyzing sales coverage using geospatial data. You can learn about this session and many equally exciting sessions on our website under the events tab. That's salesmanagement.org/events. I'm Bob Kelly, Sales Management Association Chairman. Thanks again for your time and attention today. Goodbye until next time.